The shell was too small, way too small. Uncle Watty crouched down on the wet sand, his weathered hands cupping a tiny hermit crab that was practically bursting out of its borrowed home. The little crustacean's soft, vulnerable abdomen was exposed, a death sentence in the wild. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were on the coastline of Monterey Bay, where the Pacific crashes against rocks covered in barnacles and sea stars. Uncle Watty, a marine biologist who'd spent 40 years studying these waters, had invited me along for what he called the most important mission you'll ever witness. I'd expected something dramatic, whales maybe, sharks at minimum. Instead, I was staring at a creature the size of a grape. Uncle Watty looked up at me with those intense blue eyes.
Do you know what killed this crab's chances of survival?
I shrugged. He pointed down the beach, where a rainbow of plastic debris dotted the shoreline like confetti after a parade. Bottle caps, straws, fragments of packaging, all of it tangled with seaweed and driftwood. Hermit crabs don't grow their own shells, he explained, gently placing the struggling creature in a small container of seawater.
They're scavengers. They find empty shells from other mollusks, snails, mostly, and move in. As they grow, they need to upgrade. Think of it like trading in your apartment for a bigger one.
Simple enough.
The problem
Uncle Watty continued, standing up and stretching his back.
is that we've made the housing market absolutely brutal.
Here's the thing about hermit crabs that most people don't realize. They're incredibly picky. They don't just grab any shell. They inspect potential homes with the precision of a building inspector, checking for cracks, measuring the interior, even weighing different options before making a decision. Some species will line up in order of size, passing shells down the chain until everyone gets an upgrade. It's called a vacancy chain, and it's one of the most cooperative behaviors in the animal kingdom. But that system only works when there are enough shells to go around. And increasingly, there aren't. Ocean acidification is dissolving shells faster than mollusks can produce them. Overharvesting has depleted populations. And pollution? Pollution has created an even stranger problem. Hermit crabs are attracted to the smell of dead snails. It signals an available shell. Plastic, as it degrades in the ocean, releases chemicals that mimic this scent. You can probably see where this is going. Uncle Watty led me further down the beach to a small tide pool. There, wedged into a bright orange bottle cap, was another hermit crab. It had mistaken trash for treasure. This happens constantly now, he said, his voice heavy. They crawl into plastic containers, pieces of PVC pipe, even doll heads. The plastic traps heat, exposes their soft bodies, and most of the time, they can't get out. They die slowly. We spent the next hour carefully extracting hermit crabs from their plastic prisons. Uncle Watty had brought a collection of natural shells, purchased from ethical suppliers who gather only empty, naturally discarded shells, specifically for this purpose. The process was delicate. Each crab had to be coaxed, not forced. You couldn't just yank them out of their makeshift homes. Hermit crabs have a powerful grip on their shells. They'd rather be torn apart than let go. Instead, Uncle Watty would place a suitable shell nearby and wait, sometimes for minutes. The crabs would investigate, climbing in and out of potential new homes, comparing sizes, checking the fit. One particularly fastidious individual rejected 3 shells before finally settling into a beautiful spiral number with hints of pink and cream. That's a turban shell, Uncle Watty noted. Good choice. Should last him a while. By midday, we had relocated 17 hermit crabs, 17 tiny lives saved. It felt simultaneously significant and impossibly small against the scale of the problem. But Uncle Watty wasn't discouraged. He'd been doing this for decades. You know what keeps me going? He asked as we packed up our equipment. These little guys are survivors. They've been around for millions of years. They've outlasted dinosaurs, ice ages, mass extinctions. They're resourceful, adaptable, and tougher than they look. He pulled out a waterproof notebook filled with years of observations. In the early days, I'd find maybe 1 or 2 crabs stuck in plastic per kilometer of beach. Last year, 37 per kilometer. The numbers are getting worse. But here's the twist. In areas where regular cleanup efforts take place, where communities come together to remove debris from shorelines, the hermit crab populations are actually thriving. Uncle Waddy showed me data from a protected cove just north of our location, where volunteers conduct monthly cleanups. The difference was staggering. In that cove, hermit crabs were finding natural shells at nearly the same rate as they did 50 years ago. The vacancy chains were functioning. The population was stable. It was proof that intervention works. Every piece of plastic you remove from a beach is one less trap, Uncle Waddy said. Every natural shell you leave behind is a potential home. It's that simple. We walked to a rocky outcrop where dozens of hermit crabs were going about their business in the tide pools. They scuttled over algae-covered stones, waved their tiny claws at each other, investigated crevices for food. A few were engaged in shell negotiations, circling each other, tapping shells, apparently haggling over a particularly nice specimen. Uncle Waddy had been studying this specific colony for 15 years. He recognized individuals by their shell patterns and behavioral quirks. See that one with the black-tipped claws? I call her Margaret. She's been through 6 shells since I started tracking her. Very aggressive negotiator. Always gets the best real estate. Margaret, as if on cue, climbed over a competitor and claimed a prime feeding spot. The afternoon brought an unexpected discovery. While scanning the shoreline with binoculars, Uncle Waddy spotted something unusual near the waterline. A cluster of shells, natural ones, had washed up in a small depression in the sand. But they weren't empty. Baby hermit crabs, he breathed.
A whole cohort of them.
We approached carefully. There must have been 50 tiny crabs, each smaller than a pea, all recently emerged from their larval stage and searching for their first shells. This was their most vulnerable moment. Before finding suitable shells, they were essentially naked, exposed to predators, dehydration, and the elements. The shells around them were too large. Not a single one was small enough for these miniature creatures. Uncle Waddy sprang into action. From his pack, he produced a small container of microshells, barely visible to the naked eye, that he kept precisely for situations like this. He scattered them gently among the baby crabs. What happened next was remarkable. Within minutes, the tiny crabs began investigating. They climbed in and out of shells, discarded unsuitable ones, tried others. It was the vacancy chain in miniature, happening right before our eyes. By the time the sun started its descent toward the horizon, most of the baby crabs had found homes. They dispersed into the tide pools, beginning their long lives as the ocean's tiniest renters. That right there, Uncle Waddy said, watching them go, that's why we do this. He explained that hermit crab populations serve as indicators of overall ocean health. When they thrive, it suggests a functioning ecosystem with healthy mollusk populations, clean water, and minimal pollution. When they struggle, it's an early warning sign. Think of them as the canary in the coal mine, he said.
Except the coal mine is our entire planet.
On our way back, we conducted one final sweep. Between us, we collected 2 trash bags full of debris, everything from fishing line to food wrappers to an inexplicable number of flip-flops. Uncle Waddy pointed out that much of this plastic had traveled hundreds, even thousands of miles on ocean currents. A bottle cap dropped in Japan could end up on a California beach. A straw discarded in Mexico might wash ashore in Hawaii. The ocean connects everything. That's the bad news and the good news, he said.
Our garbage travels everywhere, but so do our solutions. Every piece of plastic removed from any beach helps marine life everywhere.
As we loaded the trash into the back of his truck, I asked Uncle Waddy if he ever felt hopeless. The problem seemed so vast, so overwhelming. He smiled, that weathered, knowing smile of someone who'd seen things get worse, but refused to give up.
I've watched communities transform beaches from dumping grounds into sanctuaries. I've seen hermit crab populations recover in just a few years when people start paying attention. I've witnessed young volunteers become marine biologists, policymakers, advocates.
He closed the tailgate.
Hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you create, one shell at a time.
We drove off as the tide came in, erasing our footprints but not our impact. Somewhere in those tide pools, 17 hermit crabs were settling into new homes, and 50 babies were beginning their journey. The ocean was a little cleaner than we found it. And that, Uncle Waddy would say, is exactly the point.